Great. Thanks, Kevin. And welcome everyone to the Data Weekender version 7. So it's great because I'm Anupama Natarajan. So I'm actually speaking from Wellington, New Zealand. And it's almost end of Saturday for us here, close to 9 p.m. And thanks for making my session as the first session because like I can have a small nap and then come back and watch a few more sessions later in the morning. And and first of all, thanks to all the organizers and especially Kevin for moderating my session here in this Fabric track. And thank you for doing this and also for all the other organizers because I know what it takes to organize these type of events, and that too like a great opportunity, making it for like more or less free event for everyone from any part of the world to participate. And of course, I have been recommending all of my user group members also to just participate in this. Of course, the time zone is a bit odd for us, but doesn't matter. Like if you're passionate about something, why not? So thanks for all the organizers and volunteers for putting up this event. So great. So the topic which I'm going to present today is something like I really like about, so which is GraphQL, and especially in the context of how we can explore the Microsoft Fabric's GraphQL integration. So what is GraphQL is all about? So I'll start with that as an introduction. Of course, everyone knows about Fabric. So I'm not going to talk about like, okay, Fabric, all components within Fabric and so on. You would have been hearing this a lot from a lot of speakers across a variety of events. So I'll assume that everyone knows here what Fabric is all about. So straight away, we will start looking at what is GraphQL. And then slowly then we will look at like what is that integration of GraphQL with Fabric is going to look like and what advantages it provides and why do I need that and how is it different from SQL. And of course, like we will look at a demo to understand around the GraphQL capabilities that Fabric provides. So before I get into this, as I said, I'm a data and AI consultant. So I run my own company and I do consulting and training through that. It's Pearl Innovations Limited back in Wellington, New Zealand. So if you have any questions post this session, of course, towards the end of the session, I'll be opening up for Q&A. In the meantime, you can also put your questions in the chat and towards the end of the session, I'll go through the questions, I'll answer them. Just in case if you have any question post this event or when you are trying GraphQL with Fabric, feel free to reach out to me and I have got all my details here and I'll also share my slide pack with the organizers. So at any point in time, you will be able to reach out to me. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for data platform and AI, as well as a certified trainer. So been in IT for almost 20 plus years and working with the data almost more than a decade. And so was initially passionate more about relational databases. And then I was introduced, to be honest, like I didn't know anything about warehousing or analytics. So I was more focused around operational databases, operational reports, and building applications over it. And then I was exposed to by one of my colleague about dimensional model and analytical databases. Really fascinated about like what type of insights you can infer out of analytical databases. And that was the turning point in my career where I was able to just decided to move on to say like focus more on the data space. So since then, never looked back because I think the analytics space keeps me busy, whether it is coming in terms of modeling the data or cleansing the data, analyzing the data, or even presenting the data in terms of visualizations and reports. And another interesting thing also, like I never confine myself in terms of if I have to get value, if the businesses have to get value out of the data, it's not about just reporting is the only way of doing it. There are other mechanisms in terms of like AI needs data. And like a lot of organizations do B2B transactions and they need the data in the form of API to be exposed in the form of API. And similarly, one such way is the GraphQL. And we are going to talk about like what is GraphQL, why it is really important, in what scenarios that we will be using GraphQL, and how does it really works with Microsoft Fabric. So that's pretty much what I'll be covering. A quick agenda here just to showcase. I will introduce you to GraphQL, as I mentioned, And also like we will look at what is the integration of GraphQL with Microsoft Fabric looks like. A little bit of understanding about GraphQL schemas and how do you manage relationships with GraphQL, and also what is the monitoring capability that you have got with GraphQL within Microsoft Fabric. A few references that you can take back and you can look at your leisure to know more about this topic. And of course, like a Q&A towards the end of the session. So let us get started then. So GraphQL, as you all know, it is an open source query language. And if you look at it, it is mainly designed for APIs. And if you want to query any data that is already stored in a database or anything, you will be able to just pull the data. So you send from your application, you basically send a request in the form of JSON. The GraphQL API is going to take the request, go and query any backend. In this case, if we talk about like our data is sitting in Fabric, so we will be able to get the data from Fabric and then get the response back to the application again in the form of JSON. So similar to how an API works, right? So this is what people think in terms of like, okay, the API already provides it, where GraphQL is going to be really valuable. So GraphQL is really valuable other than the normal relational databases, because if you take lot of like especially like if you take social media channels as an example, right? If I take Facebook as an example, a classic reason is like there is a lot of relationships in there. So the relationship is not sometimes like a straightforward relationship like a one-to-one or one-to-many. It can be a more complex relationships, and we need a better way of representing those relationships. A classic example is I have a Facebook friend, and my friend like who is like my personal friend or my school friend, and then I may have a professional friend, and then my school friend has got another friend who is actually a schoolmate to my professional friend. So as you can see, like how easily this particular relationships can become complex, and how do you represent that in a better way? And that's where GraphQL is really powerful. So if you start looking at it, if you start using relational databases and things, it gets really challenging in terms of how do you represent complex relationships like this. And that's where GraphQL plays an important role. And that's why there is a huge amount of traction when it comes to GraphQL. So basically, like with the GraphQL, it is easy to understand the relationships between the data. And also it gives the power for the clients to exactly understand about how the data is organized and easily presentable for them. When we talk about Fabric, right? So what is that GraphQL API within Fabric is all about? So we know Fabric is a SaaS service, and the GraphQL API within Fabric, it's a managed service that Microsoft provides for you. So if you think about Fabric and if you look at this diagram here, so there is a lot of data sources from where we will be ingesting data inside Fabric. So when we talk about ingestion, like it was interesting because this morning I presented another session where we talked about different ingestion options within Fabric. So ingestion means I'm not always talking about ETL. As you all know, there are different ways of ingesting data inside Fabric, like mirroring and so on. But irrespective of whatever mechanism that you are using to bring the data inside Fabric, so if you want to if you are building a warehouse or a lake house where you are combining the different data sets together, it is a great opportunity to expose that data in the form of API, and typically in the form of like a GraphQL API. So how do you go about doing that? Historically, if I have to build a API for GraphQL, then probably I have to write something in the application using some programming languages. And this is where Microsoft now, with the help of Fabric, they have given an easier way of exposing the data in the form of GraphQL API. Typical API where you will be able to read the data from different data sources that are where data is collated from different data sources and stored in Fabric. And also the other option is mutating data. So when we talk about mutating data, we are talking here about what are the other operations other than read that you can do on the data. So like you typically take your CRUD operations like create, update, and delete, right? So you will be able to decide on whether you will be applying that provide that capability on the API level, or you can keep the data just only to expose what we call it as read option only. So that also you can easily configure. So which is what we are going to see in our demo. So the main idea for having GraphQL is one is to make it easy to expose the data from Fabric for applications to consume in the form of GraphQL. And the other one is like you can also reduce the amount of data. So if you are just going to specify, if the clients are going to specify what exactly that they really want, we can even reduce the amount of data that we are transferring across the network in order to provide that data. And especially when we build relationships, then instead of making n number of calls, you can even reduce it to bring with a single call all the information that are required by the application. And that's what the powerfulness that you get out of GraphQL with the GraphQL API with Microsoft Fabric. So why GraphQL, right? So why I should be thinking about GraphQL? Why not SQL? Won't SQL provide me that capability? So SQL is actually a query language which we use traditionally in databases, which is all good. As I said, when things get more complex, where you have to have represent complex relationships, GraphQL plays an important role to make it easier. And when you talk about the data structures, in SQL, it's all about tables, right? So all the data is stored in tables in the form of rows and columns. Whereas in GraphQL, everything is represented in the form of nodes, and nodes are nothing but we call it as the entities. And then you have edges, and edges are nothing but the relationship between the entities. And that's what represents the graph structure. And that's where if you have got complex relationship between data points, then GraphQL is the better way of representing. And that's why I gave that example of the Facebook relationships where there is a lot of nested relationships in here. And the better way of representing that is putting that in GraphQL structure. GraphQL also provides you flexibility. So the clients can really request exactly what data that they need rather than over providing lots of data. So just because you have got all the columns in here, you don't need to provide that. Whereas in SQL queries, people tend to pull a lot of data than what they require. Of course, if they have the ability to filter what they require, but GraphQL gives you better control on that. And similarly, when it comes to performance, like GraphQL also improves performance depending on what is the amount of data that you are going to pull out of that. So think about where GraphQL is really valuable than SQL is if you have to represent complex relationships in your applications. This is we are talking here about the complex data relationships, then GraphQL is a best candidate to use than your SQL. And why do I need an API for GraphQL? As I said, the API is mainly, right, all the data in Fabric is all consolidated inside Fabric. So if you want to access any of this data, you need a mechanism for your application to do that. Either if I want to connect it, I can use the SQL Analytics endpoint. Yeah, that's fine. But also like the GraphQL API will give me the data in a graph in the structure of the graph, like where I have the nodes as well as the entity stuff that we were talking about. So if you look at it here, in terms of the query language, the data structure, the flexibility, and the performance, you get that advantage with GraphQL, whereas like that's not that something you get with traditional SQL. Mutations is the ability to modify the data. So it supports just to read only if you want, or if you want to modify the data or perform write operations on the data, you'll be able to do that even with GraphQL. But you can restrict what you really want to do with GraphQL within Fabric. So when we talk about GraphQL, the next thing you have to understand is about the schema. So the schema is exactly typical like how you have a relational schema, right? Similarly, in GraphQL, you also have got a schema, and this is how it is going to tell how the data will be queried or how it will be mutated or how it will be related. So one way of representing them is the object types. So object types is nothing but it is representing the data entity in the GraphQL schema. So I talked about, right, it's all about the entities and the relationships. So here when we talk about object types, it is always about the entities. So how we can get the different entities together and then how we can make them related to each other, and that's what the object types is defined about. On the other hand, you have fields, and fields are nothing but what is the type of data that you need to be querying on that object type. So think about it as like columns. Object types is like tables and relationships, whereas fields is like the columns that are available within a table. So these can be either scalar types, or it can be even other complex types that you want, and it can be used both for reading the data as well as modifying the data or writing the data. So typically, like types are in SQL, you call it as the SQL tables, and whereas like the fields are nothing but we call it as the SQL columns within the table, which can be queried, filtered, modified, and so on. So this is what the GraphQL schema comprises of: the object types and the fields. Another important aspect is, as I said, the relationships. Typical like how you have got in SQL, you can also build relationships with GraphQL. So you can have one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, or many-to-many relationships. Doesn't matter. So what type of relationship you can have. And the great thing about GraphQL is the ability to represent complex relationships, right? And that's what it is really powerful with. So it supports all the form of relationships that you can use, and in an easier way, representing the complex relationships also in an easier way. So why do we need the GraphQL API in Fabric? So here we don't need to write any type of code. Automatically the code will be generated automatically, like you can attach a data source inside from Fabric, and it will discover the schema and it will generate the API code. You will get an endpoint that you can use in your application to query that. Of course, you can manage your authentication and authorization inside Fabric for your GraphQL instances. There is a huge support for views of SQL databases and warehouses. If you have store procedures and you want to expose the output of the store procedure, you will be able to do that. If you have multiple data sources where you have to just get the data coming from multiple data sources through a single graph API in Fabric, you will be able to do that. And as I said, you have relationships, all the type of relationships that you can create in them and also retrieve them. And you can expose only selected objects from a database, or only selected columns from the object from the database quite easily. And last but not the least is we can easily build APIs and stuff, right? But monitoring also plays an important role. A lot of metrics that you need to know is who is hitting the API, what endpoints are getting hit, and how many users are doing it. So those type of monitoring capabilities are also available for your GraphQL API in Fabric. And we are going to look at that as part of the demo that we are going to look into that shortly. So what type of data sources are supported to be exposed as a GraphQL API inside Fabric? Fabric Data Warehouse, Fabric SQL Database, Fabric Lakehouse via SQL Analytics Endpoint, mirror databases. So these are the mirror databases which you can expose it as a GraphQL in Microsoft Fabric. Open mirror databases, Azure SQL database, and any data marts that you are creating, they are all good candidates in terms of supported data sources where you can expose the GraphQL API within Fabric for that. So what is the step in terms of if I have to start thinking about using Graph API inside Microsoft Fabric, what do I really need to do? The first and foremost is you need to identify or designate for which particular data source needs to be exposed as a GraphQL API inside Fabric. So once you have decided on the designated data source, then what you do is you go ahead and create an API inside Microsoft Fabric. So what you have to do is you need to connect to that particular data store, select what objects that you need to be exposing, and then you can also decide on, as I said, like do you want to just provide the read-only access to those objects, or do you want to like provide mutations like write options to those objects? So you can you can configure those also as part of the creating API for GraphQL. Then finally, once you do that, then you have the ability to view what we call it as that is a GraphQL editor, which pretty much showcases the ability to query those tables that you have exposed. And then you will be able to, so you can send a request in the form of a JSON query, and then you will be getting a response in the form of the JSON query. So what you're seeing is the GraphQL editor, which is also available within the Fabric interface. This is the Schema Explorer. So the Schema Explorer is you will have whatever objects and fields that you have exposed. So when you are connecting to the data store, which I'll show you shortly, one thing you will be doing is selecting which particular object that you want to expose and which particular fields you want to expose. Then you will define that. And for each and every one of the object, you will be deciding on whether you want to expose the right operations or not. To be more specific, I'll show you under mutations. The image may not be clear here, but when I do the demo, you'll be able to see that. So you have the what we call it as the create, the update, and delete. Specifically, you can mention like do you want to enable just only one option. So for instance, they can create using GraphQL API, but they can't update, or they can't create anything, but they can just update, but they can't delete anything. So you can enable or disable any type of operations here under mutations, or you can disable everything and keep it just read only. So this is what we call it as the Schema Explorer area. Then the second part is what we call it as the run panel. So this is where like you will be able to provide your request, and then you click on the run, and then the panel what you are seeing in the which is the results. This is where the output of your executed query. So when you click on run, this query will be executed and the output of that will be displayed in the results panel. So one final thing is the query variables panel. So suppose if you want to pass many parameters as variables to your queries or for the mutation, then probably like you will be able to just use the variables in here. So typically, if you are using any programming languages, normally you pass a value for each of the variable, right? Same concept in here. So if you want to pass any values at runtime to your queries, you will be able to do that using the query variables panel. So pretty much this is what the GraphQL editor that is available within your Fabric environment. So before even you integrate your GraphQL API with your application, you can issue the queries test here, and you can perform the like different combinations in here before you provide that endpoint to be connected through the application. So another cool thing is also the ability for you to connect to multiple data sources. So if you look at one of the main benefit of GraphQL in Fabric is the ability for that to easily connect and expose multiple data sources. So which means like you can integrate varieties of data. So whether they are coming from SQL databases, whether they are coming from the warehouses, or whether they are coming from other storage systems, you can unify everything into a single API, which is a GraphQL API. And this is the flexibility the developers will be getting. So if they are asking for, okay, can you give me a unified version of these information coming from different data stores, or in Fabric, as you know, like we have now we can create a database, operational data store in there. And if you want to pull some data from that, as well as you want to pull some data from your warehouse within Fabric, I will be able to do that and expose that as a GraphQL API, which can be integrated in the applications. Pretty straightforward. Cool. So let us quickly look at how GraphQL API in Microsoft Fabric works, right? Let us go through a simple demo here. I'll just first drag and drop my Fabric interface in here. Cool. So everyone would have used a Fabric. So I'm assuming like this is not this is a familiar interface for you, nothing new. So what we are going to do is we will start with creating a workspace. And in that workspace, what we are going to do is we are going to create a sample database. So the workspace can be trial. So as you can see, I'm using only Fabric trial. So this demonstration, which I am trying to do here, if you sign up for a Fabric trial version, you normally get that for 60 days, and you will be able to replay this particular demo even in your trial version without any issues. Okay, so let us go and create our first workspace here. I'm going to create a new workspace. We'll have data weekender demo, maybe 7.0 demo. Cool. And as I said, trial version is fine for your workspace. Just go ahead and create your workspace. So once you create your workspace, the first thing that we are going to do is we want to go and create a sample database. So creating a sample database is pretty straightforward. You can go here and click on create. And if you scroll through, so this is like any object type or any fabric item type that you are creating. So right at the bottom, you can see the option for databases. If you don't see this, probably you have to go and jump onto the admin portal. Because some of the preview features need to be enabled at the tenant level. So as you can see here, so I have enabled the ability for the users to create SQL databases. If I don't enable this, probably you won't be able to see the option of creating databases. The reason for that is it's a preview option, right? So if you want to provide this capability, you can provide this. Thanks, Kevin. I just noted your comment. Of course, like I will add an image also. I think I have that Data Weekender logo with me. So I'll go ahead and create a sample database. And so here I'm going to just to use, because I'm going to populate some demo data, I'll use the AdventureWorks database itself, because that's the one for which I have got a sample data within Fabric. So let me go ahead and create the database. And once you created the database, then the ability will be available for us to load some sample data into the database. So just give me a sec for the database to be created. Sometimes it's quite interesting when I just share the screen, right? It takes time. And that's why I tend to pull the screen a bit on the other. So if I don't share the screen, it is much faster. Not sure why that lag is, but it's quite interesting to note that. Okay, so now I have the option to populate some sample data. So as you can see, it is starting to import some sample data to my AdventureWorks database, because as you know, we have sample AdventureWorks database. So it is going to go ahead and take a little bit of time to populate that data. Not a lot, a minute or so. And so while it is populating the data. So while it is populating the data, let us talk about what are we going to do next. So as you can see, this is a typical operational database that we have got within Fabric. Once the data is populated, like any other databases, we can go ahead and pretty much we can go ahead and query it. So it is a SQL database, right? I can just issue a SQL query, and I will be able to do everything like what I can do. For instance, like I can run DDL, DML or DCL and everything. So why am I talking about these things given I'm talking about GraphQL integration with Fabric, right? Just to give you an idea, it is a typical relational database what you are creating in here. And everything that you want to do, you will be able to do with this. So let us quickly refresh and see. Great. Shortly, it should say to us that it is creating the data. It will be done soon. So just let us give us a couple more seconds and then it will be all done. So what we are going to do post this is we can see the sample data has been getting created in here. It's successful. So now I can go ahead and write a new query. So a typical simple query, what I will do is I'll just go ahead and join these tables. So I have got a product table. I'm joining with the product category, and I'm going to just write a typical SQL statement. So don't worry, I'm going to show you GraphQL, but just I want to show you like whether we have got data imported in here successfully, right? So that's the reason I have done that. So enough of this, because I'm not here to teach you how to do SQL. I think there are better people to do that. We will talk about how to create an API. So now I have got this operational data store in Fabric. Now the next part I need to do is I need to go ahead and basically like create endpoint. So what I'm going to do is get back into my workspace and I will create a new item. So typically like here, if you keep scrolling, like how we created the database, under develop data, you will be able to see the ability to create an API for GraphQL. So this is where like you can build, use this API to build your software applications or integrate it with your software applications. So now I'm going to give a name for my API. So I will say, maybe it's AdventureWorks, right? So let me create this. Cool. So the first step in this process is now I'm in the process of creating the API. I have to choose the data source. So here I can choose the data source, and if you look at it, there are a couple of options in here. One is whether you want to select the connectivity option where you want to connect to Fabric data sources with single sign-on authentication, which is by default it's there. But if you want to connect to Fabric or external data sources using a saved credential, you can also do that. So let me go through the option of connecting through my single sign-on. As you can see, I have multiple data store. I created one demo just in case if I have any problems with the demo, I can showcase it. So I'm going to choose the one which is part of my Data Weekender demo workspace, connect to it. And this is typically going to bring in all the objects that are available in my particular table. So like in the particular database. So here I have the ability, and you can see it brought in my store procedures also. I don't have any views at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select a particular table here. So let us go and select a product table. So we have got, so these are views, I think. So these are prefixed with view. And let me take the product table as an example. So here I'm going to just use a single table. The reason for that is you have the ability if you want to choose multiple tables, but we will just use the single table, preview the data that it has some, and load it. There you go. So what you have got here is you have the schema explorer. So I already showed you this screenshot in the presentation. So now I have got the ability to actually explore this particular table and the schema of this table in here. So these are the columns I have got, and any queries that I have to store, I have got in here. And this is the interesting part I was showing you, because I have got only one table which I imported in here. Here I have got the mutations, which is the create, update, and delete for my product description. So I think let me go back and just bear with me for a sec. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and check this one. Okay, so that's the AdventureWorks demo graph. Sorry, what I'm trying to do here is I wanted to just go ahead and create a new one. So let me go here. I think I want to create a different table because I have some pre-built queries. So let me delete this one and I'll create a new demo graph one. So new item, I chose the wrong table. So I don't want to at the runtime writing queries for you to showcase. So save the time. I'll just do this one. So AdventureWorks. Let us go and create it. Oh, okay, so maybe it is still remembering because sometimes it takes time to purge. So maybe we can say demo one. Cool. Choose my data source, my AdventureWorks database. Okay, so let me choose the correct. So this is the product category, product model, product description, and product table. Yeah, this is what I wanted. Cool. So you have got the product ID, the name, the color, the standard cost, and quite a few things that you are looking for in the product table. So just to make sure that we are on the product table. Great. So now we can load this. The reason for that is I have some pre-built queries built in, so I don't want to try running queries at the runtime here. So quite a few columns, as you can see, because this is like a product table, which has got all the details about the product and the mutations which I talked about. One of the option here is you can go ahead and disable. So if you decide I don't want to give them people to access from through the API to create a product or update a product or delete a product, I can go ahead and disable this. Pretty good, right? So The cool thing I like it here is like I don't need to write all these things in a programming language. So if I want to prevent any modifications or updates to the data with the help of API, which means like the API will be always read only and the data will be read only if they are accessing via the API, which is all good. Now the next step I need to do here is like I need to just send a GraphQL query. So the query is going to be, I want to just pull in certain set of items. So I'm writing the query here. I'm saying from the products table, filter with the name starting with the HL road frame. So I need to find out all the products their name starts with the HL road frame. And also I want only these columns. So where I want the following fields to be included, like the product model ID, name, list price, color, and the size and the modified date. So what this is going to provide me is a list of all the products where the name starts with the HL road frame, and then it is going to, if I run this query, it is going to provide me the output that are correlated with that. So let me go ahead and run this. So as you can see, now I have got this data available, and what I have got is a list of all the products. Now I can able to use this endpoint, and then I will be able to use this in my application. So this is all good, and this is where if your query needs any runtime parameters, you will be able to provide that in here. But the question is, this is all good. I have the schema explorer where I was able to explore the schema, run the API, and it's all giving me the right results. But how do I integrate this with my application? Because that is the next question that you will be having, right? So the next thing is, this is your endpoint. So if you look at it, this is the GraphQL endpoint for this particular data source that we have connected and the configurations that we have made. So now you have the ability, like you can go ahead and copy them. And then pretty much this is what you have to use it in your application. So I don't have time to go through the application code and do that, but typically it is like you will take this endpoint and whatever application that you are creating, because at the end of the day, it is an endpoint which is going to be input is need to be passed in JSON, output will be received in JSON. So you will be able to just use any programming languages to talk to this particular endpoint, and you will be able to just get that information. So pretty much you will be able to do that, and you will have the capability in terms of what you can do. So there was one question I just it just caught my eyes straight away, was like are the mutations only enable disable, or can you assign to specific intra groups? From the user interface, it is all about like enable or disable. That's it, you have got. If you want to apply specific intra groups should have things, you don't do it from the Explorer here. Manage it on the application end. So where you can figure out like who is the user who has logged in via the application, which intra group they belong to, and depending on that, you can expose the capabilities what you require from the application. So I will keep everything enabled at the endpoint level here, but manage that from the application layer level. So in that way, you'll be able to do that. But if you are completely like disabling it or something, then it is fine. Another cool thing is also you can do is because users are, if you are using Entra to give access to Fabric, because all the users will be Entra users for who are getting access to Fabric. If you are using already Entra for that, yes, when they log in, and if the same like you are using as authentication, Entra as authentication mechanism for your application, you will be able to inherit whether it's enable or disable through here, but not more granular other than that. So the key ones you can do is the CRUD operations like a read or create, update, delete, which is coming as part of the write operation. So yes, you will be able to manage it if you want to completely on the app level, or if you are using Entra to log on to Fabric as well as for the application, then you can disable it at the Fabric level, and then that will be inherited when the user is actually logging in. So you will be able to handle in that scenario also. So depending on whether Entra is used in both the cases, like same Entra tenant is used for authenticating the user and also like authenticating to Fabric. So if that is the case, then yes, you can use the Entra groups. If a user is a member of the Entra group, you will be able to do that. There is also a piece of you can generate the code. So if you are looking for like a sample code. And I really like this option because if you look at like even I work a lot of things with the AI capabilities that Microsoft provide. And nowadays like they give us like a sample code. So if you want to know how to integrate APIs or even AI related, the Foundry related stuff in my application, I can generate sample code. And also it gives you in both Node.js as well as Python. So here is a sample code that you can use. And here I talked about, right? So you can register your application and use the Entra tenant, and you will be able to just pass that, and you can pass your query, any variables, and then finally like you can issue it and you get your JSON response. It's pretty straightforward like that in terms of how you will be using, you will be able to use the endpoint. So the endpoint that we copied, right? And that's what exactly has been used here. So this is the endpoint I said, like when you say copy endpoint, this is the endpoint you will be able to go ahead and utilize it. So if you want some sample code, you will be able to go ahead and do that. And so you can alter any additional data stores that you want to add. You can go and do that. And also like you have settings option. So where we will, the next thing that we are going to talk about, so you'll get to see the endpoint even here. And if you look at here, monitoring. So first thing is like we need to enable monitoring at the workspace level, and then you will be able to monitor the capabilities too. So let me jump onto my slides at this point. So what you saw was a quick demo just to showcase like how you can turn on the GraphQL API for Fabric. You can choose what are the objects and what are the fields that you want to expose as part of that API. And quite easily like you will be able to even decide on whether you want to give read permissions or create, modify and or create, update and delete permissions. And also like if you want to just get some sample application code, just use the generate code option and you will be able to do that. So the another important aspect is when it comes to GraphQL is all about like, okay, how do I go ahead and monitor these things? So how do I know what type of request we are getting, how much request that I'm successfully able to provide, or the GraphQL API is successfully able to provide a response. So you can go ahead and turn on monitoring. One thing is at the workspace level first, and then you can also do it at the GraphQL API level. So once you turned on the options, then you get metrics or monitoring metrics and graphs that will provide you more information. So there is an API dashboard which provides you like how many API requests per second you're receiving. What is the success rate of that? So how much percentage of the requests are really successful? Whether your API endpoint is healthy, and total number of API requests at any point in time. So you'll be able to see that typical like in Azure Monitor that you get to filter it by 7 days or last 30 days or even custom date range. You will be able to do that for this also. So you can drill down at the API request level if you want to see more details at the API request level, and there are some graphs like this that are also available for you to go ahead and utilize it. So if you want to just to do monitoring out of the Graph API, you will be able to do that without any issues. So the key part when you are talking about GraphQL is when it comes to monitoring, the another aspect people will be interested in, how do I monitor specific behavior or operations within GraphQL? So if you want to identify things like, okay, what are the type of users and what type of applications are being issuing a lot of queries? If I want to troubleshoot slow queries, how do I diagnose issues with GraphQL queries? You will be able to use the metrics and the log in order to facilitate those type of troubleshooting quite easily with the monitoring dashboard. This monitoring dashboard is currently in preview. That is something to keep in mind. So which means there is a lot of capabilities that they are still adding. And the monitoring feature also, there is going to be additional charges incurred on your capacity, because that's what people will be interested to know. So am I going to get any additional charges? Of course, if you have assigned a capacity, basically like you will be, the monitoring also will be incurring some charges at the capacity level. And these metrics and logging from your GraphQL API, there also will be sent to the Custo database within the workspace. And that is going to be like you can use that for any querying purposes that you require. So the reason I'm highlighting this is it's not about just creating an API and exposing it to applications, because down the lane you need to know which application is using what, so that like if you are making any changes to this particular API, you know exactly like in terms of which applications are going to be impacted. So that's why it's important to for you to understand like how do you go about doing it in terms of monitoring. So as you can see, it is pretty straightforward. And previously, we used to actually write a lot of code in order to expose any data coming from databases in the form of GraphQL. Now, Microsoft made it really simple. You go ahead and you create the capability straight away, expose the endpoint, and then take that endpoint and you can utilize it. There is a lot of samples available in terms of like how you can use GraphQL, and I have also provided a lot of URLs in here for you to get started. I'll share this information, so which means like whether you want to write code in C# or whether it's in Python or in React application, so you will be able to just to go ahead and use the GitHub examples to use in any programming languages that you require. So pretty straightforward. And if you also want to use in other mechanisms, not I showed you like how you query an operational data store, right? So there are also examples that you can use if you want to connect it via the if you want to connect it to your warehouse within the Fabric to pull the data, or multiple warehouses or multiple warehouse and databases, you will be able to do that and expose what you require via the GraphQL API. So pretty simple. And if you have people who have just worked with APIs a lot, you will understand what it means, because we've spent a lot of time trying to go ahead and generate code in order to expose the data in the form of API, but now you get this as an out-of-the-box capability within Microsoft Fabric. So that's the key part that I really wanted to highlight as part of the session. So how you will be able to use the GraphQL capability in Fabric. So if you are thinking about joining multiple tables together and expose it, you will be able to do that. So think about in this way: when you are dealing with data where you have got complex relationships and you need to have a better way of representing it, GraphQL is your way to go. And if you want to use GraphQL, then you need to have an API where your application can query the data and it can represent that in their in the graph format. To do that, Fabric provides you a native capability where you will be able to go and create a GraphQL endpoint, and you will be creating the API endpoint. You can choose a selected objects, you can choose selected columns within the object, and then you can issue the queries and you can pull only what data you require. And the key ability is the ability to connect multiple data sources. So don't forget that it's not about just connecting to one data source. If there are multiple data sources within Fabric where you have to join them to get the data, you will be able to do that. So there is another question I have got. Do you have any learning guide on how to build those queries and best practices around that? I'll add a few more URLs before I send the PPT to the organizers. So give you some samples around like how do you build your requests, especially like when you are dealing with multiple data sources, like how you can send the request and retrieve the responses. So before you do that, make use of that GraphQL the schema editor, right? So the schema editor will provide you the capability where you can practice all your queries before you actually integrate that in the application, because application integration is going to be pretty straightforward. You have a templated code with error handling, of course. You send a request and send a response. The request is exactly what you are framing as a query in the schema editor. So make sure like you provide the query, test your queries, and then you need to just plug that in the application. And I would recommend you to do that rather than the application developers doing that, because some of the best practices, because I noticed that what are the best practices that you have to consider, it is always people think I'll try and get everything, and it's a concept like when in the mindset they have got when you are building applications, I may not know what the application need in the future, so let me pull everything. So if you take the product table as an example, the product table has got like nearly 10 to 12 columns. You don't need all the columns if you are not going to showcase it, right? And as you saw, it is quite simple if you want to extend the application. So bring only what is really required. Don't bring more columns in there. And also when you are joining, apply the same principle. So bring in only the objects that you really require in the application. And the more you try to bring in a single query, it is always well and good. Because if you are trying to, for instance, one of the key thing with the graph is like product details together. So if you want to join those two tables and bring the columns together, you avoid the number of requests that you are sending, right? In one request, I will be able to send and I can get the details. These are some of the best practices that you can do. Not specific to Fabric. I'm saying these are best practices when it comes to like a graph queries that you write. So I will also put some generic URLs. They are not Fabric specific, but they are generic URLs that provide you some best practices that you can follow when you are writing GraphQL queries. Cool. I think I'm going to get back into the questions part here. So we have got another few minutes where I'm happy to take up the questions. But if you don't have any questions and if you want to come back and ask me at a later point, feel free to reach out to me through my social media channels. And let me go through some of the questions here. Does the API follow permission setup with one lake data access roles, or the client app need workspace or item level contributor rights? Yes, it needs. So we, from an application to access it, we will be creating what we call it as the service principal, which is the app registration that you do in the Azure Entra ID. Sorry, it just always comes to me as Active Directory. So formerly called as Active Directory, it's currently called as Entra. So yeah, you will be creating an app registration so that you will be able to use that information to connect to the you will be using the app registration which is the service principal, in order to get the token and get access to it. So I'm assuming your Fabric and the application where you are using, they are all connected to the same tenant. If that is the case, yes, you will be creating a service principal, and using that service principal, you will be able to retrieve the token from Entra and you can use it for your authentication authorization purposes. So thanks, Kevin. Any other questions anyone has got? So I'll just quickly go through and scroll up just to make sure any questions I have missed. I talked about mutations. Yes, you will be able to manage that with your Entra groups. Do I have a learning guide? Yes, I will add some or additional. There are a few links in here, but just on the best practices when it comes to GraphQL queries, and also like how do you like materials to write GraphQL queries, especially like if you want to join multiple data sources. I'll add a couple of links in addition to that, what I'm seeing here, and I will be able to just showcase it to you. Not sure why I got this. Yeah, any other questions anyone has got before we wrap up the session? Cool. I'll wait for the questions, but if there are no questions, thanks for attending the session today. And thanks, Data Weekender, for providing me the opportunity to present. Really, as I said, my passion is all about the data, but what are the different ways you can expose the data? So everyone, when we talk about data, everyone thinks about visualizations, right? Because that comes top of the mind. So this is the only way we can showcase or provide data. But these are like, for instance, like providing APIs or showing the complex relationships in a much more user-friendly way in the way of graphs. There are other ways of like getting value out of the data and exposing the data. So definitely I will ask you to give a try around how to create the GraphQL API within Fabric. Pretty straightforward. And also like you don't need to write an application code. There is a built-in, you take the sample code, try to use it so that you can see how you can get the responses and use it in your applications. So thanks for joining my session, and thanks for asking some interesting questions. So if you have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer any sort of questions. And of course, I will update the couple more URLs which I talked about around best practices, and I will circulate the PPT to the organizers.